Hello and welcome to the first ever episode of Murphing the Movies. This is a show where myself, SwimMurph, and my brother, Tennis the Menace Murphy, we review movies. And as today was John Lennon's anniversary, well at least it was when we were filming, we thought we'd cover a few films about Mr. Lennon. But first, I must introduce my co-host and brother, Tennis the Menace. Say hello, Tennis. Hello, Tennis. It's going to be a long video. Anyway, yes, he is still learning English, so I shall be doing most of the talking, but he does most of the reviewing, and then I basically have translated for him. He's really the big film expert, but his English is not so good. So Tennis is going to deal with the clips that you're going to see, and then he will come back for the review at the end of the film. And then he will come back to do the rating at the end. Oh, we should probably cover the ratings. So if we happen to review the greatest film of all time, it gets the following rating. Now, if it is still pretty good, but not as good as that, it gets this rating. If the film is pretty good, but still not quite great, it gets this rating. If the film is mediocre, it gets this rating. If the film is crap, it gets this rating. And if the film is even worse than that, it gets this rating. That is basically how the ratings are going to work. And now we're going to get on with the first film. Now, there have been quite a few movies made about John Lennon over the years. Some of them very, very good, and some of them absolute dog shit. However, he had an interesting life, even though he did only live for 40 years. But yes, interesting man who has certainly brought out a lot of ideas in different people. Now, the first film made about the Beatles, or John Lennon, without actually starring the Beatles themselves, that I'm aware of at least, is Birth of the Beatles. We're not really going to talk about that one here. I think Elliot Roberts has already done most of these, so he's going to go into much more detail about some of them. We're mostly going to talk about the ones that he didn't talk about so much. But Birth of the Beatles is basically Pete Best's version of events as far as the early days of the Beatles go. It's very biased towards his side of the story, but it's kind of entertaining. I wouldn't give it that much of a review. That's why we're not really going to review that one, because it's not really worth mentioning. If you want to hear the Pete Best side of the story, he tells it in interviews a lot better than the movie does. So yes, we're not really reviewing that one. We just thought we'd get that out of the way. But the first film we're actually going to review came out a few years after the death of John Lennon, and it is called John and Yoko: A Love Story. And much like with the Pete Best film, this is very much Yoko Ono's version of events.
I like that.
Unfortunately, this was a made-for-TV movie. It's never had an official release, and so the only version we can find is the version you're about to see a clip of. Okay, Tennis, play the clip.
John, you can't say that the Beatles are more popular than Christ and not expect this kind of reaction.
Should have put on me backfull gear.
There'll be plenty of extra security. We'll go in, do a quick show and get off. And no interviews. I'll take care of those.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Beatles!
Now, there's a couple of notable things about this film. Number one was the first choice for actor for playing John Lennon, unfortunately had the name of Mark Chapman. And if you know the story of how John Lennon died. That was probably the worst name that he could possibly have. So as this was Yoko's film, really, he got fired. But he did later play the role in a brief cameo in the film Chapter 27, which we're not really going to talk about here either, as that's more about Mark Chapman. The other notable thing about this film is that George Harrison is played by the Doctor. That is right. So, in case you weren't aware of this, there is a historical character called the Doctor, and this Doctor has interestingly ended up playing themselves on television quite a lot. At this point, the Doctor was going by the name Peter Capaldi. Yes.
Politics and music are like religion and music. They don't mix.
Music? What music? I can't hear a bloody note we're playing out there.
And this would not be the only time that the Doctor would appear in something Beatles-related. There was also Lennon Naked, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But yes, at that point, the Doctor was known as Christopher Eccleston, and he played Mr. Lennon in that particular film. So yes, aside from the appearance of a young Doctor Who as George Harrison, I wouldn't really recommend this film too much. I did see it on television at the time, and I've seen it again through watching it on YouTube in the terrible quality that we've got the clips for here. But yeah, it is okay. It is very, very long though, and I question some of the casting choices. Peter Capaldi is great as George. The guy playing John, I can't think of his name right now, he does an okay job. As the same with most of the Beatles and most of the other sort of main characters. My main criticism, I suppose, of casting would be the actors playing Yoko Ono. I think they just found the first Asian person that auditioned to play the part, because she looks nothing like her, she sounds nothing like her, and she acts nothing like her. So, yeah, odd choice there, especially as the real Yoko was very involved in the making of the film. So for this film, we're going to give it... So yeah, not a great film. I'd say it's mediocre. If it was cut down to maybe an hour and a half, it might have been better. With a few better casting choices, it might have actually been a good film. Also with a bigger budget. The fact that Yoko was involved meant they were allowed to use Beatles music, which was good. But, you know, it's just, yeah, not a great film. But worth checking out if you're a big Beatles fan.
Don't you do that. What do you think this is? This is not a game, you know.
I'm sorry. See you later, John.
You've no idea who that was, have you?
John something.
Lennon? The Beatles?
Oh.
Now perhaps the hardest film to find about John Lennon is The Hours and the Times. It is a speculative look at John Lennon's trip to Spain with the Beatles manager Brian Epstein. Tennis, can you hold up the DVD cover, please? Now, it was often rumoured that John and Brian had some kind of a relationship. Murphy did briefly talk about this on his Beatles 1965 video, so we're not going to go too much into detail about that side of things. It was rumoured, even at the time, that Brian and John had some sort of an affair during this particular trip, and the film kind of goes into what might have happened, and I think it does a pretty good job of it. It certainly captures John very well. He's played by Ian Hart, who would go on to play him several more times, which we are going to talk about here. Of all the people that have played John Lennon over the years, I think he's probably the best. Maybe David Leon, who played him in Beatlemania, does get him... I don't know, I'd say it's getting out of those two. I'd say would be the best person to play John Lennon, because they just really capture the essence of the man, I feel.
Are you on holiday?
No, we're just popping over to knock round at Gaudi's.
Oh, yes. I must get back to work. I wonder if I might have an autographed photo sent by post.
Can you imagine how big America is?
A lot bigger than New Zealand.
Doesn't America fascinate you?
Sure.
Could anything be bigger than America?
Yeah. Just stand by that bush while I take your picture.
I'm not very good at this.
Of course you are. Dandies love to pose.
I beg your pardon.
Brian Epstein is played by David Angus, who does a reasonably good job. I don't think he really looks the part, but I think he does sort of capture a lot of Brian's mannerisms and that sort of thing. So I think he does a great job there. I give one of my criticisms of this film, as opposed to the John and Yoko film we just talked about, is that, well, that film was too long, this film is too short. It's basically about an hour long. I would have liked to have seen it stretched out to a full hour and a half. I think that there was a lot more they could have covered, and it does sort of end as a bit of an anticlimax.
Does it bother you that the chef here probably spits in his gazpacho soup?
That's an awful thought. What makes you think he spits in it?
I noticed the colour was a bit off.
Well, I prefer not to think about it. It's like thinking about how many people urinate in a public pool.
I'm one of the worst pool pissers there is, and I can't even swim.
But you're going to the bullfights. When are they? Sunday?
I think so. Eppie's all excited. Sounds like a bore to me.
As for what happens between the two of them, again, it's purely speculative as far as the film goes, but it does show something happening between them. As this is YouTube, they're probably not going to let us actually show that, as it is a bit racy. So we're going to get the Murphy-furphy-tipps players in, and they are going to reenact the sexual scene between John and Brian. Ah yes, hello, it's Sussex Murphy here, and we're just here to quickly reenact a scene from the Hours and the Times that's probably a little bit too explicit for YouTube. So, yes, Cousin Furphy will be playing the part of Brian Epstein, and our very special guest, The Undertaker, will be playing John Lennon. And I, BG Tips, will be playing the part of the bathtub. John has filled me with water, and he's about to climb inside me. Although I am slightly out of shot, I'm just down here. Oh, Furphy, you're supposed to be naked, you're in the bath. Oh yes, but it's YouTube, I think that we'd probably get in trouble for that. Good point. I'm in the bath, having a nice relax. Oh hey, Eppie, come on in. Splash. Wait, this is getting weird. So after a quick clumsy make-out in the bath, John Lennon runs off, and then a girl shows up and they have a bit of a dance, and Brian goes and talks to a Spanish waiter for a while. Yes, so that's basically all that really happens in the film. It doesn't get more detailed than that, but yes. Thank you.
It's all futile.
You keep saying that. You got the world at your fingertips.
Let's get something to eat.
Yeah? Okay. Sure you've got time? Great, I'm starving.
So yes, we thought we'd err on the side of caution there, just because YouTube doesn't like anything particularly explicit. So yes, this is the basically as far as it gets, as far as suggesting that John and Brian had sex. There is a shot of them in bed together, but they are fully clothed. So, but yeah, they kind of leave it up to the imagination of the audience as to what may or may not have happened. But I think it's a pretty good film. And now here is Tennis with the rating. Now Ian Hart would play John Lennon 2 more times. He's still alive, so he could potentially do it again, but he's getting a bit old now. In fact, the most recent time he played John Lennon was in a short film called Snodgrass. And this is another speculative film, because this film talks about what would have happened if John left the Beatles in 1962 over the song How Do You Do It. How Do You Do It would be a big hit for Jerry and the Pacemakers, but initially it was recorded by the Beatles, and they didn't like it. In the film, it suggested that the other Beatles ended up being okay with it, but John was not, so he quit the band, and now he's living sort of in a council flat, and very sort of, it's kind of sad, but kind of funny too. You can watch the whole thing on YouTube. Here's the clip.
The rain's coffee miles or come to ring your bell. 40p.
40p. I drove tanks in the Navy, you know. I've drowned for me country.
Yeah, 40p. And get a move on, you're holding up the other passengers.
All right, Snodgrass, keep your helmet on. Yeah, there's your 40 pieces of silver.
Let's say 39p. There's 1p missing.
Well, this is my last one. Will you take a check?
Move.
So yes, it's basically a day in the life of the John Lennon who is unemployed or trying to get a job and gets jobs, but they tend to not last very long, in his 50s. And yeah, it's kind of sad, like I said, but there's a lot of funny moments too, and Ian Hart still brings his A-game playing John Lennon.
Obviously, the solo career's up the kazoo again.
There you go. Go on. Upstairs.
It's all right, missus. We're getting off the next stop. You no need to call the men in white coats. Mind you, a few bars of the oldie mulligan tie will all be ready for fucking straight jackets.
But the film he's perhaps best known for as John Lennon is Backbeat. Okay, Tennis, bring up the Laserdisc. And this seemed like as good a time as any, seeing as though we've just showed you a Laserdisc, to talk about Home for the LD Lee. We had to get the sponsorship announcement in there somewhere. So, Tennis, what rating would you give Home for the LD Lee for their special deals on Laserdiscs and their value for money and their ability to find rare titles? 6. Wow, yeah, that is actually breaking the mold already for as far as our ratings go. Thank you. So yes, Laserdiscs. They're a great format. No longer in production, unfortunately, but they're a great way to watch films and concerts and various other things. This is obviously the one for Backbeat. Great film, which we're about to talk about. Having seen the film both on this Laserdisc and on the initial DVD release, I'd say that the Laserdisc is better because although it's the same print, this was earlier in its time, and so there's less aging and things like that. So you don't see as many sort of holes in the film and that sort of thing. So yeah, I think that this is the best way to watch this film personally. The DVD versions just aren't quite up to it as far as the picture quality goes because the film has aged, and this sort of captured it at that time when it still looked really good. So yes. Now while this film is mostly focusing on the Beatles' original bass player Stuart Sutcliffe, John Lennon is a big part of this film, obviously, because they were best friends, and possibly more, as with the Brian Epstein relationship, there was rumours there too. In fact, there is this one scene where they do suggest there may be something going on.
What is it then? What is it between you two?
What is it?
Yeah, what's going on?
Are you saying I'm a queer? Is that what you're saying?
Look.
Are you saying I'm a fucking fairy? Is that what you're saying, Paul?
That's not what I said.
What is it? That's what you said. What is it between us? That's what you said, Paul.
Never said you were fairy.
What do you mean, eh? For Christ's sake!
You just leave it alone.
He spoke.
But again, it kind of left up to interpretation. And also one other interesting thing about this film is that the soundtrack, or at least the Beatle performances, they couldn't get the rights to the Beatles performances, obviously. That's quite hard to get. But they managed to get... But they put together a supergroup of grunge and alternative musicians, including Dave Grohl, who was in Nirvana at the time, and Mike Mills from R.E.M., Thurston Moore from Sonic Youth, and a few others. And yeah, they got together, they formed the Backbeat Band, and they perform all of the Beatle performances for the film.
The best things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I need mine. That's what I want. That's what I want. That's what I want.
Personally, I think that Ian Hart steals the show as John Lennon. As I said earlier, I just think he gets John really well. I think that John probably was like that a lot, very sort of, that sort of prickly sense of humour that he had. And I just think that he even looked a lot like him. So I just think that, yeah.
You know what I like about Liverpool, Mr. Sutcliffe?
Now, what is it you like about Liverpool, Mr. Lennon?
I was hoping you'd tell me.
As far as casting goes, I think most of it they did really well.
In 1960, they hit the road.
It's only temporary.
Temporary.
Well, what do you want for nothing? Are you top 10 yet? You haven't done nothing yet.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're the band. You'd be happy to know we keep our clothes on.
That's why I go for that rock and roll music.
The guy that plays Paul, he plays the part really well, but I just think he looks a bit too... he looks more like if Paul McCartney was a professional wrestler. He just is a bit too big and muscly.
You know that, don't you? All he does is stand there. It's the way he stands.
I just think this is a really well-made film. It's not all that historically accurate, but it's more historically accurate than the previously mentioned Birth of the Beatles, and it is far less speculative than The Hours and the Times.
She wants to take a photograph.
She can photograph my arse, mate.
You are the angriest person I have ever met.
I'm not angry, sister. I'm desperate.
I think you're jealous.
Jealous? Oh, yeah, jealous. Jealous of who? Jealous of Stu.
Jealous of me.
One became a legend. The other fell in love.
Juicy's just a girl.
You don't know her.
She'll get rid of you. She'll finish with you as she did to Klaus. She's going to do to you.
I think that of all of the films made about the Beatles, especially at this early stage, which there are quite a lot, this is the era that's probably the most well covered in film, mostly because they don't have to worry about paying for Beatles songs. Because they mostly played covers in those days. I just think this captures the essence of who they were the best. And so, we're going to give Backbeat So yeah, despite a few historical inaccuracies, I just really love this film. I think it captures a lot of what the 60s... I just think it captures the way the Beatles would have been at that time really well. And, yeah.
Backbeat, the remarkable story of the friendship behind the most popular band in history.
There goes Stuart Sutcliffe. He could have been in the Beatles.
I love him, John.
Don't we all?
And now we're going to talk about two films at the same time, because they are basically the same film. That is, John Lennon in His Life and Nowhere Boy.
Nice hat, Mum.
Posh, isn't it? Thought I might wear it to high tea on Sunday. And I was the handsomest lad in Liverpool.
Not so good.
Oh, trouble again at school.
I hate it there. Teachers are a bunch of bloody sickos.
Nothing's changed, John. They're all fools in my time, too. But it'll all be over soon enough. Just pay them no heed. Come on. Let's go inside and have a nice cup of tea.
Now, In His Life was a very low-budget film made for television. The casting choices are bizarre. The guy who plays John really looks nothing like him. I really don't know how he got the part, because of all of the people in the film, he probably looks the least like John Lennon.
Oh, dirty Maggie May, they have taken her away, and she'll never walk down Line Street anymore. Oh, but don't you guilty bounder for robbing the homeward bounder, that dirty no good Robin Maggie May.
He does bring quite an emotional performance to it, and I'm sure he's a good actor. I just think he was miscast here.
John, look at this.
What? I didn't bring me glasses.
Eleanor Rigby, beloved wife of Thomas Woods, asleep.
Sleep. Yep. What the hell does that mean?
Means that we better get out of here before she wakes up.
Now, I first saw this film on VHS, and yeah, I thought it was mediocre at best.
John, great show, lads. Really great.
Tonight will be even better.
Yeah, you two know each other, yeah?
Yeah, hi, Paul. Hi, Pete.
John, I want to introduce you to a friend of mine. This is Paul McCartney.
Hi.
Paul plays guitar too. He's really good.
Great set. Like the way you played with the words. I don't know. I make them up. Noticed you only used 4 strings. It's the latest style in America, mate.
He's only pulling your leg. His mum's been teaching him on a banjo.
Aye, that explains it.
But then a few years later, they decided to make Nowhere Boy, and it is basically the same film, except there was a lot more creepy stuff with John and his mother.
Oh, why can God make me Elvis? Because he was saving you for John Lennon.
But other than that, I'd say it's basically a shot-for-shot remake. There's a lot of scenes in the two films that it almost looks exactly like the same shots. And so, yeah, I can't really review them as two separate films because in my mind they're basically the same film, just with different actors.
At the moment, you're going nowhere.
There's nowhere for the geniuses, sir. So I probably do belong there.
And in both cases, the person who looks the least like John Lennon in both films is the guy playing John Lennon.
I'm gonna start a rock and roll group.
You've been picked to be in my band.
We don't know how to play.
You don't have to know. What's important is I've chosen you. I'm John. Paul.
And a bit of kind of creepy trivia. The man who plays John Lennon in Nowhere Boy was about, I think, 16, 17 at the time, and ended up marrying the film's director, who was about 40. They are still together, so obviously it worked out, but it's kind of creepy that she got together with a barely legally... got together with a man who was barely of legal age. I'm not really going to... No, we're not going to rate these films separately, because again, it's basically the same film. So we're going to give them both... Yeah, you might have some fun with them, but essentially they're just not very good films, not very well made. The acting is all over the place, and the diving into John potentially fancying his own mother is a little bit creepy, especially when you know the backstory of what happened on the set of the film. So, yes, I'm not really going to recommend either of those films. Or rather, we're not, because he's the one doing the actual reviewing. I just mostly translate.
Tom, your little friend's here.
It's my buddy Holly, look. Good. Are we ready to do this, boys? If we're gonna do this, we should write our own stuff. I write stuff. Not songs, more poetry, you know. Add a tune to that and you got a song.
Up next, the Doctor is back. This time he's playing John Lennon under the guise of Christopher Eccleston. And this is Lennon Naked. Now this story basically tells the same story as John and Yoko, a love story, at least the first sort of half an hour of it. But this sort of fleshes it out a bit more, and it played a lot better. The actress playing Yoko does look a bit more like her this time.
I was a mess before I met you. And who am I?
And I think that the Christopher Eccleston Doctor does a much better job of playing John. Although he was a bit old at the time. I believe he was about 40, playing a man who was, I think, just about to turn 30 for the most part of the film. This film also talks about the relationship between John and his estranged father, Freddie Lennon, and I think it does a pretty good. And I think it does a pretty good job of it. How that John Lennon grew up really not wanting to be like his father, and basically ended up doing the same thing that his father did to Julian Lennon. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good film. Not as good as some of the others on the list, but we're going to give it the rating of... Oh, and a bit of trivia for you. When the film was played on American television, it was introduced by the Doctor, this time playing the part of David Tennant.
Tonight on Masterpiece Contemporary.
Look at me.
Now, the most recently released film to cover the Beatles in any way is Midas Man. This is mostly about their manager, Brian Epstein. And something I need to mention, this also comes up with The Hours and the Times. In both of these films, Brian Epstein is usually referred to as Brian Epstein. The only person that calls him Mr. Epstein in The Hours and the Times is actually kind of one of the villains of the film. So, yeah, it's interesting. But Brian was very... Brian and his family were always very insistent that it was Epstein and not Epstein. I don't know where they've got this idea of it being Epstein from. Probably because that's how Americans would pronounce it. And so, yeah, he's... they say it wrong in both of these films. But it is more egregious here because Hours and the Times was really a low-budget film. They probably didn't have the research budget. Whereas this film is a major film with major international distribution, so really they should have known better. They did quite a lot of research for it, but they got that wrong for some reason.
Hello, my name is Brian Epstein. Hello, my name is John Lennon. My name is Paul McCartney.
George Harrison, how do you do?
Pete Best.
What I saw on that stage, I shall never forget it. I want to represent you. Be a manager.
But you've got no experience, Mr. Bryan.
Well, how hard can it be?
They're good musicians. I wouldn't touch them with a barge pole.
Those boys will be bigger than Elvis.
But aside from the inaccuracy of pronouncing his name, I'd say that it's fairly accurate to the real story. And yeah, I think it's a pretty good film. Not much else to say about it, really. Oh, other than the fact that the guy playing John is about a foot shorter than everybody else, which it looks a bit odd when you see them all on stage together. As for this film, it's going to get...
Our roster of artists spreading the Liverpool sound to every town in the country. Jerry and the Pacemakers, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, Tommy Quickly and my beloved Scylla.
Do you really think I'm a star?
I never doubted it.
We're getting you treatment, you're just not well.
He is not sick. You just can't change the way that he is.
So yes, this was the first ever episode of Murphing the Movies. I am SwimMurph, along with my brother and co-host Tennis the Menace. Say hello. Say goodbye, Tennis. Goodbye, Tennis. Oh, here he goes again. Okay, that is the end of the episode, and thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check out Home for the LD Lee, and he's behind me, isn't he? Yes?